In a prior video, I described how the unit was cleaned, the KLR filter. In this video, I'm going to actually show you how to clean it prior to use. And what I have to help is a pre-cleaned spoon and a tub that was rinsed out with distilled water. I have the filter I'm going to use. Now this particular batch we're doing was right after the primary fermentation was completed. Somewhat of a secondary, but what I did was I stirred out the gases in the wine and I added the clarifying agents, and so they're going to form that lovely layer of stuff in the bottom, and we're going to filter the wine off of that. It's the first time it'll be filtered, so I'm going to use the 5 micron filter, which is marked in red. The next thing I have is a bag of potassium metabisulfite. This is what we use to make sure that we've sanitized everything prior to use. I have a paper towel I'm going to use to swab the inside to make sure I get good coverage. I have some distilled water. Never use chlorinated water out of the tap because it will impart bad flavors and odors to your wine. And then I have the filter that I'll assemble as we go and clean it. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add the water to my little tub here. Potassium metabisulfite, you add about 2 ounces per gallon. I'm going to throw a couple of spoons in here, teaspoons full. That's probably a little overkill, but when it comes down to sanitization of things, I'm somewhat bullish on more than less. Stir that around. It dissolves fairly quickly. Be careful not to put your face down in this. Even though I've been told and I've read and everybody's told me it doesn't harm me when I take a big lungful, it's very uncomfortable. I cough a lot, just like everybody else. It's not very fun. So let's go ahead and just throw our parts in here and wash them off a little bit. We'll save this for last for room. The first thing I'm going to do is get the filter and the base, the filter cartridge itself. I rinse it with the rougher 5 micron filter. There may be some little lumps and things because it's a coarser type of a fiber, and just kind of go around and pick off anything you think might be able to get in. I think I've pretty much cleaned them off before I send them to you, but do make sure that there's no kind of like chunks on it. Take the base, we'll take the paper towel and kind of swab around inside underneath those threads, etc., with the potassium metabisulfite, making sure we get it clean. Make sure we run some down through the fitting. Next thing we do is we'll go ahead and set the filter in the body, kind of lean it there for now. I'm going to wipe off the filter cartridge seal, set it there. Now I'm going to take the body and basically just kind of rinse it around in here a little bit, making sure that I give this fitting a really good dousing of the potassium metabisulfite liquid so that any bacteria, anything around it that we don't want in the wine stays out of our wine. Give it an inside swabbing. Shouldn't need much. Things out the last time I used it, I cleaned it pretty well. I'll hit the outside as well. And by the way, my hands were washed and rinsed in distilled water, and the potassium metabisulfite also helps my hands stay clean. So let's pick up the filter body. I did kind of forget a little thing here, and that's this gasket that's got to go in the body, so we'll wash that real quick and get it in there. Again, we start it underneath the threads, working our way around to where we have this little hump left, and we use 3 fingers, 2 fingers just to press it down, get it in there. Next, we take the filter cartridge, set it in the center. Then we'll take our filter cartridge seal and set it on top. Then we take our filter body, center it somewhat, screw it on, and here it's wet, and you can actually see how well it seals when you take a close look at it, as far as making sure that no wine's going to go through that center hole and drop without running through the filter sides. So that's it. We can now set this aside and get our carboys ready for filtering. In this segment, what I'd like to do is actually use or show you how to use the KLR filter to do the actual job of it, which is filtering your wine or beer. It's a gravity feed system. It's not designed to take high pressure. I have kind of pressurized a little bit on my own just to see how it held up, and it did okay for a few PSI, but again, it's not made for that. So please don't pressurize this unit. It's not made for it. All legal disclaimers, all that stuff. If it does blow up because you did, I'm telling you not to, here and in the instruction manual. Anyway, so let's go through the actual filtering now. I have a batch of wine. It's a Merlot Sangiovese. It's been sitting in here for just about 2 months on the initial clarification, which means that I stirred out the gases. I used a little wand and a drill to get rid of the CO2. The next thing I did was I added some chitosan and other things that came with this wine kit to grab onto the particulate within the wine. There's positive and negative charged particles in there that we don't want necessarily in our wine. And so the things that you add go out and they grab onto them and they become heavy enough to settle down over time. And so when we get down to the bottom of this, I'd expect us to see a layer of sludge, certainly. That means that it did its job and did clarify the wine and grabbed all the stuff and fell down. But most importantly, what I hope to see is great results going into this jug from the KLR filter. Now understand that this is the first filtering, and so we're using the 5 micron. That means there will be particles, possibly yeast cells and things like that, still in this wine after I filter it. This first filtering is to get rid of the kind of like the big chunks. Earlier when I was setting this up, I saw a small nefarious fruit fly hovering around the batch. If he made it in there, this will take care of it. I don't think he did. I got this, I generally tend to cover things with paper towels covered with potassium metabisulfite to make sure, that was the hose end down there, to make sure that we don't have anything bad getting in anywhere, to include fruit-loving insects. So, what we'll do first is we'll connect the KLR filter to the siphon hose. What I suggest is going no further than the first brim or edge of the fitting. It's not required. If you go down all the way through 2 or 3 of these things, good luck getting it off. I'm telling you not to do it so that this thing will come off a little bit easier. Being a gravity feed system, the only thing we're looking for is to make sure it doesn't leak there, and it does that by going over that first ridge. You'll be fine, as long as you're using the right size hose. So the next thing we'll do is go ahead and connect up the hose that's going to go into the carboy, and I've got it back here in the potassium metabisulfite solution. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it, shoving it just past that first little edge on the fitting. Then we'll go ahead and set it into the carboy. And set the KLR filter on top. Notice that it tends not to tip over. That's that little kind of edge on the bottom of it that I provided you, so that it's stable when it's sitting on there. So the next thing we'll do is start the siphon process. We've hand tightened the base to the filter body, so we didn't over tighten it, but we made it tight enough to make sure that it seals. We don't want to see any drips, runs, or errors during this run, particularly for you. So we'll start the siphon process by gently pumping the filter body fills with the wine. Everything's going beautifully. We're filtering quite nicely. I'm about halfway through. And as you can see down here, no drips, no runs, no errors. Everything's coming through quite nicely. Again, this is the 5 micron, kind of the rough filter. It's the first one that you do after you've gone through the process of degassing and adding the clarifying agents to your wine. This is what you do, the 5 micron. And I'll show you when we get down to the bottom of this what that looks like as far as kind of working around the sludge as it filters down through. So we'll see in a little bit. Okay, we're getting down toward the bottom. Again, this was a 5 micron filtering that we've done. There's the chitosan and probably some bentonite and things like that that grab the particles that went down into the wine. And so there's not a whole lot at this point because I did a good job of getting it off the lees, but down here in the bottom of the carboy, it kind of looks like there's definitely some stuff, and we are definitely filtering it as we speak. So as you can see, the operation's fairly quick. This took probably 10 minutes or so. It's a gravity feed system, so you just wait on, it's the diameter of the tube that determines how fast this particular filtering will go with the 5 micron. It goes through fairly quickly, fairly straightforward. Now we're getting down to the bottom of it. And here within another second we're going to hear that slurping sound of the siphon running out of liquid to get. And I'll show you basically what was in the bottom here, just because I like chemistry and I think it's cool. Another second and we should hear it. And there it is. So I'm going to lift it up because I don't want to get all the kind of gunk from the bottom of that down through into all of it in there. Although on an earlier test, which I'll post photos of on the website, I actually did take quite a bit of stuff up into the filter just as a test to see how it would handle it, and the results were really good. So for now, we do this. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and disconnect the filter unit. Again, I just stick it on that first one because that's all we really need. Now, I'm going to get a paper towel and gently lift the hose out of the carboy. As you can see, there really was minimal waste. The only wine that we lost, and it's actually still kind of coming through, is within the size of that filter cartridge itself. We didn't lose a whole huge filter of it, and we didn't have anything run out the sides onto the floor, and we didn't have to stop in the middle to change that filter. We didn't have to do any of that stuff with this. The KLR filter actually eliminates probably about 98% of the waste you experience with other filters. Very, very clean, very efficient, very easy to use, very simple. And for the product quality, you're getting a great deal at the price. Talk to you soon.